It is Rebecca Ryan King here with a therapy session breakdown for the complexity approach. And the goal of this is just to show you what a therapy session can look like when you're using a therapy approach. And for reference, this is with a little 5-year-old, and it was a session where we moved a lot. We did lots of different activities, and we did a 60-minute session. And because we're at the start of the complexity approach, it means that I have to do lots of different teaching to try to get those sounds. Our target is SL, which can be quite hard for some kids. So I'm going to go through all of the activities and just give you an idea on how to have a high practice session using the complexity approach. So the first thing is we went back to our cues and what we know is successful. And for this child, it is with some forward chaining. So when this child would usually see a word like slow, they would usually say whoa, or if they remember to put their snake sound on, it might sound like swow. So we go back to this visual at the start of our session, just to remind ourselves that we can trick ourselves and we can help break down this tricky word into something easy. So we started with just going down these words, low, lay, leap, lip, and then we went and we put the sound on, slow, lay, sleep. And it just kind of got the child into the flow so that when we went for the rest of our session into using these words, it just reoriented them and they knew what to say to be successful. So activity 2, we just grabbed a popper. I know that this popper has 24 pops on it because I wrote down the number of pops. It really helps me to get my high practice trials in. And because I had this page and it looks the same and it just has all of those SL cluster words, we just said the target words and the child got to pop. It took a couple minutes and that was 24 practices. The next 2 tasks we did, we just got some Play-Doh, and I like to look at my words in my complexity approach treatment set and try to find something that's a little bit more fun and meaningful. And I really wanted to get a little bit of block practice in so that the child was getting these SL clusters correct. So our first word that we picked was slice, and we just made a Play-Doh snake, and all the child was saying was slice, and they were slicing the Play-Doh. Here's the trick though, to try to increase your practice trials as the speech pathologist or the parent at home, I want you to put your finger here so that the child can only slice a small amount, because the smaller they slice, the more practices they get. Because the child can see how long the snake is, and the longer the snake, the more practices you can get. It just means that they get more practices in because they want to get to the end. So when I did it this way, our Play-Doh snake, we got 40 correct practice trials in. So that was great. Then we swapped over to scissors. So we rolled another snake and we got scissors, and I told the child that their word was slow because they had to cut this slowly so that they didn't get my finger. And again, I'm holding this up and the child is using scissors. So it's meaningful, it's motivating, the child's engaged. They say slow, and then they get to use the scissors to chop off the little Play-Doh bits. And we got 23 practice trials doing that. So that was a really easy way to get a lot of practices in. Well, that was, 87 correct practices just in those little tasks just then. After I do some table stuff, I head on the floor. So my floor-based activity involved these cards. These are S-cluster elicitation cards. And what I did is I had the child say all the cards and we lined them up against the wall on the floor. And there's 8 of these cards. And then the child had to choose which one they were aiming for, and they used the Nerf gun to shoot down the one that they were aiming for. Now, because there are 8 cards here, we kept playing this game multiple times, because if the child was aiming for slip, and if they shot the bullet and if it didn't knock it down, they set another card and they kept telling me what they were aiming for. So in one sense, it was kind of good that the child wasn't aiming and knocking them down straight away, because it kept the child motivated. to keep on saying which one they were aiming for and then trying to shoot it and knock it down. So that was just a really fun task. We were on our bellies, we were laughing, and we got in a lot of practices just by trying to shoot down all of these cards. Now, we've just been at the table, we went on the floor. I usually bring the child back up to the table for some more work. I grabbed this sheet from the complexity approach packet and I gamified it. I added in a gaming element so that the child was motivated. And all I did is I told the child to choose a picture. So the first one they chose was sleep. And I said to them, I'm going to use my phone and I'm going to time how long it takes you to find all 10 pictures. So now the child is kind of motivated, right? Like they want to see what their time is. So they'd say sleep, and every time they pointed to a dog, I would circle it here. And then I've got a great table where I can write down things and rub it off because it's a whiteboard table. So I wrote down 1:07 because that was their time. And I said, great. And I rubbed them all out because these inserts here, they're really fantastic. You can just put any color resource in there. It saves on laminating, and you just use a whiteboard marker. So I find it really easy. And I said, okay, we're going to beat your time. So pick another one. So they picked slime, and then I timed it. Let's see if we can beat 1 minute, 7 seconds. And you bet they got 47 seconds. So I said, let's do it again. And because there's 10 little pictures on here, you know, in 47 seconds or in a minute, just to get 10 practices, that's great. And we did it 2 more times. And so the child kept trying to beat their time, and they got 30 seconds and 32 seconds. So in just 3 minutes, this child achieved 40 practice trials, and they were correct practice trials, because if the child forgot that sound, if they forgot their S, I wouldn't circle it yet. So by adding that little gamifying element onto here, we got increased practice trials in a smaller amount of time. And that's how we rounded off our session. So that was how my complexity approach session ran. I know that I at least got 127 correct practice trials because I was able to count with my activities. I was able to count how many Play-Dohs we cut. I was able to count how many rounds we did with this. I was able to count how many pops we had. The only thing I didn't count was when we were down on the floor using our Nerf gun. But to say that we got a minimum of 127 correct practice trials in a 60-minute therapy session is really, really good. It means that we're trying to get those high practice trials in to try to make more growth. And hopefully at the end of our therapy block, we're going to see that changes start happening in this child's speech sound system. So I hope that just explains and shows you how you can have a really fun high practice session with minimal prep and not a lot of planning. If you want, you can have a look in our comments and you can see where you can purchase some of these complexity approach visuals and high practice pages. The benefit about these pages and why I like sending them for homework is because in the top corner, we list how many practice trials you can achieve on each page. So it's a really nice way to keep you accountable as a speech pathologist and to make sure that you're sending high practice homework to parents. Let me know what therapy approach or sound you'd like next for a therapy session breakdown, because I would love to keep inspiring you to have fun, high practice when you're working with your students.